Have you ever stayed silent for a long time with someone who avoids closeness, and then found yourself wondering what's really going on inside them? Many people believe avoidants love quiet, that distance is their safe zone. But the truth is far more complicated. Today, I want to take you inside that psychology, the world where your silence isn't just empty space, but a mirror that forces them to face themselves. Picture this. You meet someone, things seem to flow smoothly at first, but the moment the relationship starts to deepen, they pull away. They disappear for a few days, reply with short messages, or claim they're too busy. And you sit there wondering, did I do something wrong? Do they just not care anymore? This is the classic pattern of avoidant behavior. But then you try something different. Instead of chasing, instead of rushing to fill the gap, you stay silent. You hold steady. And what happens inside them? At first they feel relief. I once had a client named Mark, a man in his mid-30s with avoidant tendencies in relationships. He told me that whenever his girlfriend went silent, he felt lighter. Finally, I don't have to answer tough questions, he said. I don't have to explain feelings or get pulled into conversations I'm scared might ruin the relationship. For him, her silence felt like a short vacation. But that's only the beginning. In the early stage, the avoidant feels like the pressure is off, as if they've just won an invisible battle. Yet eventually reality catches up. They're used to being the one in control, the one who decides when to come close and when to pull away. And they assume that after a while you'll return. You'll be the one to break the silence. But what if you don't? What if you stay silent? That's when the balance starts to crack. They step into territory they rarely ever enter, the feeling of losing control. Another client of mine, Sarah, went through this exact thing. She was dating an avoidant man. Every time he pulled away, she'd be the one to reach out first, sending a text, apologizing even when she hadn't done anything wrong. But one day she decided to stop. She stayed silent. And then he started circling back. He'd watch her Instagram stories, like posts from months ago, and finally send a casual message, "Hey, how are you?" It wasn't a declaration of love, it was a probe. A test. Are you still there? Are you still in my orbit? If you've ever been through this, you know those signs all too well. It's the avoidance way of checking whether they still hold their familiar position. But the longer they wait for you to break the silence, and nothing comes, the more they're forced to confront something they've spent a lifetime avoiding, the loneliness they themselves created. Here's the key, you're making them taste their own defense strategy. When they withdraw, they believe distance will protect them from getting hurt. But when you don't follow, when you don't build the bridge, that distance stops being a shield. It becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, they're forced to face the emptiness they've been running from. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, have you ever found yourself in that position? You stayed silent, not out of anger, not to manipulate, but simply to protect your own peace. And somehow, that silence left them more unsettled than any argument ever could? Psychology actually has an explanation for this. Research shows that people with avoidant tendencies often carry a deep fear of abandonment from early on. They learn to hide their emotions, telling themselves, "I don't need anyone." But the truth is, the need for connection is still there, just buried deep. When silence stretches on, those defenses start to crack. The fears of, "I'm not good enough," or, "I'm going to be left behind," surface, whether they admit it or not. And this isn't just theory. I've heard it in the therapy room many times. One client once blurted out, "When she didn't come back, I started to panic. I didn't want to admit I missed her, but I did. I felt like I wasn't as important as I thought I was." You see, silence can be the loudest message, because it cuts straight into an avoidance ego. What's fascinating is how this challenge sparks two very different reactions. Some become angry. They think, "Oh, so now they're playing my game." Their ego flares up, refusing to let them make the first move. But others start to feel the loss. They see more clearly that if they keep withdrawing, they'll actually lose something precious. And here's what I want you to remember. Your silence isn't about punishment. It's not a mind game. It's a declaration of self-worth. It's the unspoken message, "I won't chase. I don't need to beg for love. I have a rich inner world, and I won't shrink it down to fit the small space you're offering." When you hold silence with that mindset, calm, steady, without anger or drama, it carries a unique kind of power. It makes the avoidant both respect you and fear losing you. Respect because they see you can stand firm without getting pulled into emotional games. And fear because they realize you truly can live without them. I want you to really think about this. How many times have you sent a message just to fill the silence, just to calm the anxiety in your chest? And what if, next time, instead of rushing to get an answer, you sat with yourself and let the silence do the talking? What do you think would happen? This doesn't mean silence is always the solution. But in relationships with avoidant partners, silence can be the most powerful lesson of all. It doesn't just teach them, it teaches you. It teaches you that you have the right to keep your dignity, the right not to chase, the right to let them feel the weight of their own choices. I remember a client who once ended a session with these words: "I realized my silence wasn't about making him come back. It was simply me choosing myself." And I think that's the message I want to leave with you today. Sustained silence isn't emptiness. It's a message. A message that you are strong enough not to be controlled by someone else. And sometimes, that very message is the only thing powerful enough to reach the heart of an avoidant. There's something I want to emphasize right from the start. Lasting silence isn't a power play, and it's not a manipulative tactic to force someone to kneel at your feet. It's simply a message. A message that says, I don't need to beg. I don't need to prove my worth by clinging to you. And if necessary, I'm strong enough to walk away. I once had a client who put it perfectly: when I stayed silent, I realized I wasn't afraid of losing him anymore. I was only afraid of losing myself if I kept chasing. You see, in this case, silence is no longer an empty space. It's a declaration, a manifesto of self-respect. But what happens on the other side? When you hold that silence, the avoidant starts to experience a very specific kind of anxiety. At first, they're convinced you'll come back. But as the days go by, that certainty begins to fade. Their mind fills with questions they're not used to facing. Did I push too far? Are they ever coming back? I once worked with a man named David. He had always been confident that his girlfriend would reach out first. But one time she didn't. A week went by, then two. David told me, I started dreaming about her with someone else. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with this crushing anxiety in my chest. I never thought I could lose her, until she really went silent. That's the moment when silence turns into an alarm bell. And it's in that confusion that a deep inner conflict emerges. Avoidants are complicated people. They crave connection, yet fear being swallowed up by feelings they can't manage. Your silence holds up a mirror, where those two opposing forces collide head-on. They want you to return, but at the same time, they're terrified that if you do, they'll be dragged back into emotions they don't know how to handle. I remember a woman in her early 30s, a client of mine, who found herself caught in that same tug-of-war, but on the opposite side. She told me, when he pulled away, I wanted to chase him, but at the same time I wanted to run. I craved closeness, but I was terrified of getting hurt again. The fascinating thing is this: your silence forces the avoidant to feel the very conflict they usually create in others. That's the reversal, a powerful mirror. And as that inner conflict grows, it stirs an emotion they probably never expected. A mix of respect and fear toward you. Respect because they realize you're no longer under their control. Fear because they know that if they keep their distance they may actually lose you. For an avoidant, this is like stepping into unfamiliar territory. Suddenly they're no longer the ones holding the rules of the game. One male client once told me through tears, when she didn't come back for the first time I understood that she didn't need me. She chose me but she didn't need me. And that made me both admire her and fear her. Do you see the subtle but powerful difference? Need and choice are not the same. When you stay silent, you show them that your love is a free choice, not a form of dependence. From here, the balance of emotional power begins to shift. In the past, they believed they were the ones setting the rhythm. They pulled away, you stepped forward. They went quiet, you broke the silence. But when you don't, they begin to realize that control doesn't sit neatly in their hands anymore. The distance is no longer just theirs to create, it can come from you too. And for them, that feels both foreign and deeply unsettling. Once again, I want you to picture this. You're sitting in a room used to being the one who controls the light switch. But one day someone takes that switch away. You no longer decide when the lights go on or off. All that's left is the darkness, and the waiting. That's exactly what an avoidant feels when your silence stretches beyond what they can control. From a professional perspective, this is a critical moment. If the avoidant is ready to grow emotionally, this can be the point where they learn an invaluable lesson. Distance doesn't always protect them. In fact, sometimes distance costs them the very thing they long for most. But at the same time, if they're not ready to face their own fears, this may be the moment they retreat even deeper. The key is this: your silence isn't about manipulation, it's about preserving your own peace. You're not waiting for them to break down, you're simply refusing to sacrifice your dignity to sustain a one-sided relationship. And if they come to see that, they'll begin to look at you differently. I often tell my clients, your silence is proof that you have a rich inner world. You have friends, work, dreams, and joys of your own. You don't need to shrink yourself to fit into the narrow space someone else offers. And it's this very energy, the fullness of a person complete within themselves, that makes the avoidant both admire you and fear losing you. So I want you to ask yourself, are you staying silent to prove a point, or because you've truly found peace within yourself? Because silence carries its greatest power not when it's used to manipulate, but when it springs from genuine self-respect. When you can sit still, not texting, not worrying, not scrambling to fill the gap, and still feel calm inside, that's when your silence holds real weight. That's when others, even the avoidant, sense clearly that you're someone who cannot be controlled by distance. And I want to close this part with a reminder. Silence isn't always easy. It can make you restless, itching to break it, desperate for answers right away. But if you learn to sit with your own emotions, if you learn to let silence become your companion instead of your enemy, you'll discover that within that very silence, you're building strength